physician, restorative coach, podcaster, and psychiatrist expert witness at Welcome Humanity. Dr. Fred has been committed to the notion that communication, connection, creativity, and conversation are at the heart of all healing. Please join us to hear more from the founder of the Welcome to Humanity movement. Dr. Moss, if you could start your presentation. I just gave you a brief introduction, and you could, give us a little about your background and so on before your presentation. You have 30 minutes, and then we'll do a question and answer. Is that okay?
That's perfect. That's perfect. It looks like a great crew of men, and it looks like all men here today. Is that right? Except for my partner, Kim. Yes. I don't know about 203.
Well, I think that might be our president-elect, who is Eliza.
It is.
Hi,
Eliza. So we do have one person joining us, but in our club, Dr. Fred, we have I think 40% women.
Okay, good. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. Where are you exactly?
I'm in New Haven, Connecticut.
New Haven, Connecticut. All right, great. I used to go to New London fairly frequently, and then went to New Haven on occasion from there. So it's a pleasure to be with you all, and thank you for having me as a guest today. My name is Dr. Fred Moss, and I've been in the mental health field for 42 years. And you'll hear a little bit more about me as the essence of my speaking is about who I've now become as an aligned with the idea that communication, conversation, creativity, and specifically connection are at the heart of all healing, of all conditions, of all types everywhere. And that includes not only in mental health, but in all fields. So we're going to get started here momentarily. I just want to let you know that I am here in Northern California. I live in Grass Valley, California. I live with my incredible wife, and I have 3 cats, or I should say they have us, and they're homeschooling us each and every day with how to live life. Valentino, Desposito, and Winston are my 3 cats. I also have 2 children down in Texas. I have a daughter in Austin, Texas, who's doing fabulous. And I have a son in Dallas, Texas. And I've never even spent a day in Texas other than to visit them, but that's where they both have migrated to. So I've lived a real life. I'm 64 years old. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. And again, once you get into my talk, I'll be able to tell you a little bit more about how I got to be who I got to be, and the influence that I'm hoping to have on you today with this conversation. So again, thank you for having me. I've been really blessed to speak to some wonderful Rotary clubs and really learn a lot about Rotary in the meantime. So I'm really pleased and honored to be here with you. So in the next 20 minutes, we're going to discover things about ourselves that are holding us back from being the actual people that we know we really are. It's like the real question is, where are you not being heard? The real you not being heard. And if we were able to identify those things during this conversation, that might be enough to actually make this conversation valuable. But if it wasn't quite enough, in the next 20 minutes, what I'm going to do is show you how we can single-handedly really make a turnaround in that area such that you now begin to speak your real truth now and for the rest of your life. I've been a doctor for the last 30 plus years. I graduated from Northwestern University in Chicago, Illinois in 1988. And then I did a psychiatric residency and a psychiatric fellowship in child and adolescent psychiatry, and have been a doctor for that time. And I'm going to help you as a doctor get to the place where you can have a greater access to your true voice, and you can have a greater access to your authentic message as you deliver it in your family, in your community, all over in your life. And in fact, with that, perhaps put a notch into improving your entire life quality. As a doctor, sometimes I say stuff like, oh, it's only going to hurt for a minute, but we're not going to be doing that today. It's not going to hurt at all. It's going to be easy, and we're going to make a real bite, take a real bite out of your life and push you into a space of greater authenticity. So maybe you want to get along a little bit better at work. That would be one of the things that we'd be addressing. Or maybe you want your children to listen to you a little bit more. Or maybe you want your relationship to improve. Or maybe you want to get that raise or get the corner office or join a community or get along better even with your Rotarian friends. I have your back, and that's kind of some of the things that we're going to discuss in the next 20 minutes. The biggest threat in the world today, like the greatest threat in the world today, it isn't what you think. The greatest threat in the world today isn't a virus. It's not climate change. It's not racism. It's not sex trafficking. It's not even war, although all those things are colossal challenges to humanity. What I say is the greatest threat in the world today is that we are giving up our voice. We are sometimes having it taken from us, and other times we are choosing not to speak our true self. Why is that a bigger threat? Because all the things that I just said, all those monumental challenges to humanity are going to require us to speak out loud what matters to us. And if we can't speak out loud, if we no longer are speaking our true voice, none of these problems, these immense problems, are going to be addressed effectively. If you were to learn now, like right this minute, that today was the last day that you were going to be here on the planet, I ask you, what would you do with the rest of the day? Now, when you think about that, more than likely, if you're like me, and like most people, you would go find someone to tell a truth to. You'd be like, oh, I'm going to go tell my wife I love her. Or I'm going to tell my children that I love them. Or I'm going to tell my friend that I stole $5 from them 25 years ago. But one thing I'm going to do is tell the truth. You see, we know that the truth matters. And when backed up against the wall, we also know where we are not telling the truth. See, without a voice, we cannot be heard. And without a true voice, we cannot be known. Without a voice, however, we can be hearded. That's for sure. And we've seen lots of examples like that. With a true voice, together, we can bring in healing, love, and peace to this world that desperately is looking for those things. We might, and I say we can, even end all wars, inward and outward. Henry David Thoreau said it best. The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation and go to their grave with their song still in them. We all just want to be heard. And if that's what we want, if what we really want is our voice to be heard, then why is it so difficult to speak? What is in the way? Normally, when I ask this question, I ask people to answer, like, what is in the way of speaking your true voice? Well, certainly fear is an important piece here. Afraid that you'll be canceled, afraid that you'll be misunderstood, afraid that you'll be thrown off the island, ostracized, censored. Who knows, even worse. How can we all learn to get our true voice out into the world? Like, how can we learn to get it into the room and then to be applauded for it? Maybe not out loud by hands clapping, but certainly in the minds and souls of those who are listening to you. If you could walk away from this meeting with a new lease on life in this area of life, it would probably be worth it, right? The time now is to speak our true voice. So I mentioned I am a doctor and a proud graduate of Northwestern University, but I'm other things as well. In fact, I'm a two-time college dropout. I'm going to tell you how we get from two-time college dropout to international psychiatrist. 64 years ago in March, I was born to a family that was counting on me to bring joy and communication into the world. You see, I had a brother who was 14 and a brother who was 10, and then my parents. And as they tell me, my family was in disarray, a great deal of chaos, and little Freddie was coming into the world to bring peace and bring communication and bring joy into that family. So they waited, and out I came. And the purpose for me was really exactly that. I was called on to bring communication forth from the first second that I was born. Over the next several years, I became enchanted with communication. I learned how to communicate, certainly through speaking. I mean, I learned how to cry to get that lollipop, and I learned how to blame my sister for the problems that I was causing. And I learned how to watch my sister, younger sister. I learned how to watch these adults speak to each other. And I saw that when they said things to each other, they would listen, and then they'd go off on their way and things would get done. And I became completely enchanted and completely committed to someday becoming a communication master. I was precocious. Well, I had two brothers who taught me how to read and do math, do simple math, long before I even went into kindergarten. So when I arrived in kindergarten, there I was with a bunch of kids who were throwing blocks and picking their nose and doing all that. And I knew how to read. No doubt I was also throwing blocks and picking my nose, but I knew how to read. And I knew how to do math as well. So I was always a little bit ahead of the class in academics. I even got put into the 6th grade reading class when I was in 1st grade. And my hope was that I could learn how to communicate. And I could tell that that wasn't likely to happen in elementary school. So I thought, well, I'll wait around until I go to where the big kids are, in junior high, and they would teach me there how to be a communicator. So I muscled my way through the 6th grade, and I was so happy to go to junior high where I could learn how to communicate. And there, of course, I ran into the illusion, the disillusion, the disappointment that junior high was actually more immature than elementary school. Oh, I was really sad about that. And I thought, okay, well, that's why they call it high school. I can wait 2 years in junior high, and then I'll go to high school where the real big kids are, and they'll teach me how to communicate. Lo and behold, I got to high school, and it wasn't that much better. Communication isn't what high schools, isn't what the classrooms are about in high school. So I was disappointed again. Because I liked their helmets and because the city was close enough to Ann Arbor and the place to go, I decided that it was time that I would learn how to communicate at the university of my choice, which is the University of Michigan. I went to the University of Michigan in 1976, and I was excited to learn how to communicate. And there I learned that communication wasn't what college was about either. Now, I did learn how to communicate a bit in the city of Ann Arbor, but in college itself, I was being asked to sit down, be quiet, listen carefully, watch the professor, regurgitate what they say. The closer I could say whatever they said, just like they said it, the better student I would be, and they would pass me to the next class. To me, that was absurd, and I saw that as squashing my communication, so I dropped out after a year and a half. And those of you who are in my age group, you know what we did. And what we did was get on a bus. I got on a bus, and I took a bus all the way to Berkeley, California, so that I could figure out who I was. And I spent Doug looks like he understands that. He's like, yeah, I remember those days. I figure out who I was. And I went out to Berkeley and hung out there and actually had a good time learning a bit about myself, but I didn't have a job and I didn't have any real sustainability. And I think I talked to my parents and they said, you really should get a job. So I came back to school to study computers. And, the only computer in all of Michigan was at the University of Michigan. It was like a 2-acre computer. So I went there to study computers, COBOL and Fortran. And I thought, okay, I can hang in there, but it was worse, actually. It was worse than the previous effort at Michigan. So I dropped out again. And I came home in January of 1980 and told my mom that I'm never going back to college again. That isn't where you learn how to communicate. It isn't where you learn how to be an adult, and I'm going to find something else to do. And she was pretty supportive of it, but told me I needed to get a job. So I got a job at a state hospital for children and adolescent. And I was a child care worker. I thought I would stay for about 3 weeks, during orientation, gather up 3 paychecks, buy myself a car, and go drive around the country and figure out what my life was about. I mean, after all. But on the 4th week, I went up to the floors and I began to communicate with these human beings. They happened to be 6 or 7 years younger than me, but I began to communicate and get paid for it. And it was exquisite because not only was I learning about them, I was learning about me. And I wasn't treating them as being mentally ill or afflicted or defective, not at all. I was learning from them about their life that led to whatever fortunes or misfortunes they had. And they were learning about my life with my fortunes and misfortunes, and communication again became something critical to me. And now I could get paid for it. So I could actually buy a car. I could actually live in an apartment. And I stayed at that job for a number of years, 5 years to be exact. The thing I hated about that job, I hated the way psychiatry dealt with our kids. We would call the psychiatrist when Johnny was up too late or when Tony was in a fight with Jimmy. And we'd tell him that there was trouble. And he would come down with his weapon that looked like this. And he would interview Johnny for about 5 or 6 seconds. And then he would interview us childcare workers for another 10 seconds. And then he would talk to the nurse, and then he would write something in the chart. And then we'd have to go find Johnny and hold him down while we jammed him full of psychiatric medications, injecting. This is still going on in the psychiatric hospitals, by the way. And I couldn't handle it. I love Johnny. I couldn't handle that over the next 12 or 24 hours with Johnny in a stupor, and not just Johnny, he represents everyone. If he was in a stupor and hadn't said another word for the next 12 or 24 hours, we would write that was a success and we would move on. And to me, that was entire barbarism. It was unacceptable, and I couldn't be a part of it, even though each and every day I would be asked to be a part of stuff like that. Eventually, it hit me so hard that I decided that I would go back to school and learn how to be a psychiatrist and bring communication forward. My brother, 14 years my senior, was already a psychiatrist, so I knew that this was a possibility. And at the time, psychiatry was still thought of to be a communication field. So I went back to Detroit, and I finished school at Wayne State, and then went to Northwestern in Chicago, had a beautiful time communicating all over Chicago. And that's really where I got most of my communication experience, was away from medical school inside Chicago while I was in medical school. And the Chicago Bulls started, they got a good player in 1984, which is the same year that I started. So I had season tickets to Jordan and the Bulls for the 5 years that I was there. And Chicago was fun. And I really learned then that communication was what I wanted to focus on. Unfortunately, in 1987, there was a paradigmatic shift in the world of mental health, and that was the introduction of Prozac. Those of you who remember that will remember that was as world-changing as some of the things that are going on now. Prozac was alone on the cover of Newsweek and the cover of Time, just a picture of a green and white capsule. Prozac was being used as a medication that was telling us that if we felt bad, that was because there was something wrong with us. If we were anxious, if we were depressed, if we were scared, if we were not completing tasks on time, if we were having trouble in social environments, that was because there was something wrong with us, which is kind of absurd as well, by the way. It's like blaming a log for burning. But we had this medication that was promising to steady ourselves, and biological psychiatry was born. Chemical imbalances is what became the source of most mental illnesses, at least in theory. So here's what happened. Your hero here became a psychopharmacologist. And how ironic. After all, I went into school so that I would never have to prescribe medicines. And now the field was molding to be a field that was all about medicines. In fact, if I ask you right now, what's the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist? More than likely, your answer is a psychiatrist can prescribe medicine. So my life over the next 30 years became one of prescribing medicine and diagnosing people, even though I hated doing both of those things. 40,000 patients later, 40,000 diagnoses or confirmed diagnoses later, and hundreds of thousands of medication prescriptions later, it really wore me down. I didn't want to prescribe anymore. I didn't want to diagnose anymore. So I began to do something different. In 2006, I began taking people off of medicine. My low-risk patients, I took off of medicine and I took away their diagnosis. And lo and behold, they got better. And I continue to do this with many of my patients who not only did they get better, but often their diagnosis disappeared. I had become a healer instead of a doctor. And that's how my life went all the way through the creation of Welcome to Humanity and the True Voice methodology that we'll hopefully talk about soon. I ask you, where are you being a doctor instead of a healer? Where are you doing things because you should, because they're asking you to, that are inconsistent with you know who yourself to be? It's precisely there that I'm pointing at now. By the way, there's nothing wrong with you for having done that. We learned when we were childs that being duplicitous or being pretentious actually paid dividends, because you could get your sister in trouble or you could get that lollipop when you cried. Not being ourselves seemed to be a good choice. The crack in the cement has gone over time, gotten larger and larger, and we haven't gone back to actually be aligned with who our true self is. We have been living a quiet life with our song unsung. Now there's good news. We really can do something about that starting right now. You don't have to move to Tibet. You don't have to live in a cave. You don't have to sit under a tree. You don't have to go to therapy or analysis for years and years. You can start now. You know where you're out of line. I'd like to introduce some principles for you. Number one, pretending to be someone that you're not in order to protect who you are is absurd and doesn't work. When you look at it, you can hear, why would you pretend to be someone that you're not? Number two, you don't have very much to say about a lot of things, but you do have something to say about what you say and what you do. And you can choose to say or do something different than you have been doing starting right now. You can choose to speak a truth differently than you've been speaking. You never signed a contract to be the same person you were yesterday. Number three, speaking authentically is effective, even if the people you're speaking with disagree with your content. They are inspired by the space that you're creating inside your authenticity. Have you ever noticed somebody who disagreed with you, sometimes diametrically, and you still respected them because you knew that they were speaking from their heart? In the same way, have you ever had someone agree with you and not be speaking with your heart, and it just doesn't land right? Authentic speaking opens up the space for authentic listening and then authentic speaking of the other. People really want authenticity more than they want agreement. That's true for you as well. So authentic messages really ring true. You can get better at bridging this gap, the gap between who you are and who at times you're pretending to be. What's the key ingredient? Listening. The more you listen, not only to the voices of the people you're with, but the surroundings and the context of the places that you're in, the better likelihood there is that you'll be speaking to what's necessarily ready to be spoken, ready to be heard. Self-expression comes in many flavors. It doesn't have to be through just speaking. The way that we tend to communicate is by voice and conversation. But self-expression, as shown in a previous book that I wrote called The Creative 8, comes in several different flavors, often in the world of arts, music, dancing, singing, drama, cooking, writing, gardening, photography even. And then when none of that works, or when you don't want to do those, another way to self-express is to be of service to others. When you do those things, your negative experiences will disappear reliably while you're doing those things. Finally, I invite you to forgive, accept, and have compassion for both yourself and others. Rediscovering that your true voice, no matter how old you are, no matter how deep your habits are, has been there all along and is ready to be hatched and launched. In order to do that, you're going to have to practice real conversations with people who already know you. And maybe you're going to say something you haven't said for a while or ever. I invite you to take those incremental steps towards saying something truer than you've said ever before to the people who are listening. Even with an audience of one, you can be an influencer and make a huge difference. Or an audience of, like we have here, 15, or an audience of a couple hundred or a couple thousand. It doesn't even matter how large it is. What matters is it's an inside job to be authentic. Blurting, spilling your guts, just screaming from the mountaintops what you hate, regurgitating, that's not the same as true voice. True voice takes into consideration the context. Who are you with? What are they listening for? What's the point you're trying to make? What's the needle that you can move forward? Applause is waiting for you when you bring your true voice. You will become refreshing. You will become revitalizing. You will become reset. And this applause won't only be in the boardroom or the Rotary room. This applause can come everywhere, including your living room and even your bedroom. That's right. Your relationship with your partner is affected by the areas of life where you aren't speaking your true voice. I invite you to take incremental steps in that area as well in order to improve that relationship with might be at the center of your life. The True Voice methodology is something that I've created. It's a group of like-minded individuals collectively celebrating and committed to speaking truth and listening authentically to others, bringing forth this experience of healing, love, and peace that I spoke to before. It cannot be done alone. And in order to find your alignment, you can't just do that by yourself. This voice you're hearing in your head, it already has been heard by the other person in your head. In order to speak your true voice, it's important that you speak with another. My True Voice community and the methodology is where that can be fostered, that can be nourished, that can be nurtured. My most recent book, and I know it's going to shock you what the title is called Find Your True Voice. It goes into this in much greater depth. So starting right now, I invite you to what I'm calling the Great Reset. Step into your true voice. Start listening from your heart. And when you connect with others, you heal the world. Not only do you get to feel peace, you get to feel the truth that true voice can end wars, those inward wars and those outward wars that we're all facing. Voltaire said this best: I disapprove of what you're saying, but will defend to my death your right to say it. Finally, I'd like to introduce you to a summit that I'm hosting in the next several weeks, starting on April 23rd, a summit called We the People. WeThePeopleSummit.online is where to register for that. And I've brought together 24 influencers of very high stature, many of which you know. And those influencers are going to be speaking podcast style to me during the 6 weeks. We're also going to probably end the summit with a massive, beautiful concert of music that is designed to address some of the atrocities in the world. All the proceeds from the We the People Summit go to those who have been disrupted and devastated in the wars in Eastern Europe and Ukraine. My wife is 100% Ukrainian, and last week her city was bombed. It's absurd to have to say that. And that's what happened. Her city, her hometown, was hit with missiles just last week. In this summit, you're going to learn that, again, what I just told you or what we went through today. And that is, in order to be an influencer, you don't need 1 million followers or $1 million or to be a household name. What you need to do is address your true voice, bring authentic message to at least one person. At that moment, you become the true influencer you already know yourself to be. Welcome to your new life. Welcome to love. Welcome to peace within and without. Welcome to humanity. Welcome to your true voice. The time now is to be heard. Let me let you know that we will all applaud you in advance. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. It's been a pleasure. Dr. Fred, signing off.
Thank you, Dr. Fred. Maybe if we have a minute or so, we could, if there are any questions that people want to
Sure.
present to Dr. Fred.
Dr.
Dr.
Fred,
Fred, I had a question regarding, we live in like two tribes in this country, where you have these ultra conservative and ultra liberals, and it seems like we don't communicate. We have our own favorite talk shows, TV stations, or whatever. How do you break that barrier where no one listens to each other? We kind of shut each other off once we find out, what tribe they're in.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about you, but to me, there's way more than two tribes. There's all sorts of variants and hybrids of those two tribes now. You have no idea who you're speaking with or what they believe about whatever it is that you're saying. And the possibility is that your heart can be broken and you can be entirely misunderstood and you actually can be canceled or removed from their lives. I know that there's good friends, there's even family members who no longer talk to each other in recent times because of differences in opinions of what is thought to be important issues. What I like to answer in this question is this is an inside job. There is no protection offered by being someone that you're not or by not speaking your voice. Either way, if you make it up and you entirely make it up that you're saying something you don't even agree with, you're likely to be canceled anyways. So if you're going to be canceled anyways, if you're going to be censored anyways, you might as well speak your truth rather than speaking something that somehow protects that delicate heart of ours. So it's an inside job. And what again, with the idea of speaking true voice to your family and the ones that you love, start at home. It's really important to get that just making an influence on one person is indeed a contribution that undoes what Thoreau says. It actually allows you to go to the grave with your song sung.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I know that Colin was going to say something.
Colin?
Yeah.
well, I think you should probably join Rotary because we have a 4-way test which guides us in our daily living. And the very first tenet of that 4-way test is it the truth?
Right.
And also we have a connection with Evanston, Illinois.
Well, then.
Because that is where Rotary International has its headquarters.
Well, I didn't know that. So, Northwestern University Medical School is actually downtown, but so in Chicago, but the undergrad school is up in Evanston. But I didn't know that. I have heard this about Rotary, and I tell each Rotary group that I'm here almost every day, and I'm not officially a Rotarian, but other groups have said the same thing to me. So it's part of the pleasure of speaking to you guys is that I know that I'm speaking right up your alley.
Yeah, well, great. Our interests are aligned.
Thank you.
Well, if there's no other further questions, I'd just like to thank Dr. Fred for his insight and giving us a voice that we should hear our true voice and communicate our true voice to others.
So if you don't mind, Ronald, let me just say a couple things that I hate to get out with before I say, because you guys are so cool, I'm going to offer you a free copy of my book. My book is called Find Your True Voice, and you can find it at findyourtruevoicebook.com. If you want to know a little bit more about me, a little bit more about this movement, a little bit more about, what we're up to in Find Your True Voice, please feel free to go there, sign up, and I'll send you a copy of my book at no charge. And finally, I also want to invite you to consider joining our community, the True Voice community. And the way you do that is true-voice.circle.so. So true-voice.circle.so. Tomorrow would probably be a better day than today to join that group, although you definitely can join today, but I know it's going through some massive construction until this afternoon. So true-voice.circle.so. And other than that, I want to thank Kim for being here as my partner. Thank you, Kim. And I also want to thank all of you for your listening. And I wish you the very best of the day. And I'd love to talk to any of you who want to talk more. Feel free to contact me at drfred@welcometohumanity.net. drfred@welcometohumanity.net. Thank you.
Thank you again, Dr. Fred.
Deep pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Oh, we also had an evaluation form that Kim either got to you or we're going to get to you. I'd love for all of you to fill that out so that I can improve on what I'm doing here and learn what you might want to hear if I come back to speak with you again. So thank you. And I'm open to speak to any groups that are out there. If you have another group that where this might be an important space to speak, I'd love to hear more about that as well. Thank you again.